They said she would never see. No sunrise, no mother's face, no color, no light, only the soft murmur of voices and the warmth of hands that loved her. But one day, as her small hands brushed against an image of the Virgin Mary in a church in Florida, something extraordinary happened, something no one could explain. What followed became a miracle of the Virgin Mary that would change two lives forever. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. Hannah was 3 years old and had lived her entire life in darkness. Blind since birth, her world was a tapestry woven of sounds, textures, and smells: the creak of the apartment floor, the smell of soap after bath time, the cotton fur of her teddy bear. It was a small universe, simple, safe, and silent. But everything changed the day her little hands reached for the image of the Virgin Mary. It happened in a modest town in Florida, on a morning that began like any other. Sarah, her mother, woke with her body aching from exhaustion. After working 6 consecutive nights cleaning offices until past midnight, her bones throbbed with fatigue. But Sunday was sacred. It was the one day she had with her daughter. And no pain, no weariness, could take that away. From the small bedroom came the sound that always broke through her tiredness: Hannah's voice, soft and playful, speaking to her teddy bear. The little girl always woke up talking. Her imagination filled the silence with stories, stories of sunlit gardens, talking stars, and bright skies she had never seen. "Good morning, my beautiful girl," Sarah said softly, leaning on the doorframe. Hannah turned toward the sound of her mother's voice and smiled. It was the kind of smile that could heal wounds, a smile untouched by bitterness or fear. Sarah's chest tightened. Every time she saw that face, so full of innocence and light, it hurt a little, because she knew what her daughter would never see. Hannah had been blind since birth. For her, darkness wasn't loss, it was normality. But for Sarah, it was a weight she carried every waking moment: the ache of knowing her daughter would never see a sunset, never see her own reflection, never see the mother who loved her beyond measure. "Are we going out today?" Hannah asked, still clutching her bear. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to church." The word church meant little to Hannah. She had been only a few times as a baby. For Sarah, too, faith had grown thin beneath the weight of survival. She still believed in God, at least she wanted to, but it was hard to feel heaven's presence when the rent was overdue and her body broke down from fatigue. Sometimes she prayed in whispers at night, not because she expected answers, but because she needed to believe that someone was still listening. Still, that morning, something stirred in her. She couldn't explain it, only that she needed to go.
Sarah made breakfast with the last cup of flour in the pantry. The pancakes were thin, uneven, but to Hannah they were a feast. The little girl ate slowly, savoring every bite, her small hands precise in every movement. Though blind, she rarely missed her mouth. Her other senses had learned to see for her. After breakfast came bath time, Hannah's favorite part of the day. She loved the warmth of the water on her skin, the scent of soap, the sound of the water trickling from her hair. Sarah combed the little girl's straight brown hair, tying it neatly with a ribbon. She chose the blue dress her late mother had given Hannah, a dress the child could not see, but somehow loved. "Do I look pretty, Mom?" Hannah asked, tilting her head. Sarah smiled, brushing away a tear. "You're the most beautiful girl in the world." And it was true, not because of the dress, but because Hannah radiated a light no eyes could contain. The church was 6 blocks away. Sarah held Hannah's small hand, and they walked together down the sunny Florida street. The air shimmered with heat. Hannah lifted her face toward the sky, feeling the warmth on her cheeks. "The sun is talking to me," she said. "It says it missed me." Sarah chuckled softly. "Then tell the sun I missed it, too." She didn't have the heart to correct her. If Hannah wanted to believe the sun spoke, that was fine. Faith often begins in the language of imagination. When they reached the small parish, a few people were gathered at the entrance. Sarah nodded politely, guiding Hannah through the heavy wooden doors. Inside, the air was cool and still, filled with the mingled scent of candles and old wood. The faint echo of footsteps bounced off the vaulted ceiling. "Is this it?" Hannah whispered. "Yes, sweetheart. This is God's house," Sarah said. They sat in the middle pew. Hannah tilted her head slightly, listening, the creak of benches, the rustle of pages, the murmur of prayers. Sound was her sight, and she absorbed everything. Mass began. The priest's voice filled the space, calm and measured, speaking of grace and endurance. Hannah didn't understand his words, but she liked the sound. It reminded her of her mother when she sang softly before bed. Sarah, however, could not pray. She stared at the altar instead, at the statue of the Virgin Mary standing beneath the soft light of stained glass. The figure was simple, plaster chipped in places, paint faded, but the gentle expression on Mary's face seemed to hold a peace Sarah had long forgotten. Peace. It was a word she had stopped using. Her days were a cycle of fatigue, bills, and endless cleaning jobs. Yet, as she gazed at that serene face, something within her stirred. Maybe it was nostalgia. Maybe it was grace. When Mass ended, people began to leave. Sarah remained seated, too tired to move, too afraid that once she stepped outside, the silence of the church would be replaced again by the noise of survival. Then, Hannah tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, can I walk around a little?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. But be careful." Hannah stood, extending one hand before her, feeling the air as she walked down the aisle. Sarah watched her daughter's small figure moving slowly toward the front, cautious yet fearless. The church seemed to hold its breath. Then Hannah stopped, right before the altar. Sarah rose quickly, thinking her daughter had lost her way. "Hannah?" But Hannah didn't answer. Her head tilted slightly, as though listening to something Sarah could not hear. "There's someone here," the little girl said softly. Sarah looked around. The church was nearly empty, just two elderly women whispering prayers in the back. "There's no one, sweetheart." "Yes, there is. I feel her." Hannah took a step forward, then another, her small hands outstretched. Sarah followed, her heart pounding. And then she saw where her daughter had stopped, before the statue of the Virgin Mary. "Is it her?" Hannah asked. Sarah swallowed. "Yes. That's the Virgin Mary. Can I touch her?" Sarah hesitated again, glancing around the empty church. No one was watching. The priest had already left. "You can," she whispered. She lifted her daughter, raising her to the height of the statue. Hannah reached out her tiny hands. Slowly, tenderly, she touched the cold plaster, the folds of the blue mantle, the painted face, the outstretched hands. Her fingers lingered, tracing every curve, every line, as though reading words only she could understand. Sarah was about to speak, but something stopped her. There was something sacred about the way Hannah touched the statue, something too profound for interruption. After a long silence, Hannah whispered, "She's beautiful." Sarah looked up at the faded paint, at the worn edges of the Virgin's face. "Yes, my daughter," she said softly. "Very beautiful." She set Hannah back on the ground. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Sarah took her daughter's hand and turned toward the door. "Shall we go home?" "Yes," Hannah said, her voice quiet. As they walked out of the church, Sarah couldn't help noticing how still her daughter was, unusually silent, her face thoughtful. Something had changed. She didn't know what. She only knew that when Hannah's hands had touched that statue, something invisible had begun to move. Something no one could yet explain. That Sunday afternoon passed quietly. Sarah and Hannah walked home under the Florida sun, hand in hand. Yet the silence between them felt different, charged, almost sacred. Hannah, usually talkative, said almost nothing. She didn't tell stories to her teddy bear or sing softly as she usually did. She simply walked, her little hand gripping her mother's, as though holding onto something she couldn't yet explain. At home, life returned to its routine rhythm. Sarah prepared dinner, bathed her daughter, and tucked her into bed. But even as she washed the dishes, her mind returned to that moment in the church, the way Hannah had touched the statue of the Virgin Mary. It hadn't been the curiosity of a child. There had been reverence in her hands, as if she knew the woman she touched was alive in some hidden way. When Sarah peeked into her daughter's room before sleeping, Hannah was awake, her fingers tracing patterns on the blanket. "Mom," she said softly, "Mary is very kind." Sarah froze. "You mean the lady in the church?" "Yes," Hannah said. "When I touched her, she wasn't cold like the wall. She felt warm. I felt her smile." Sarah didn't know what to say. She only nodded, kissed her daughter's forehead, and whispered, "Good night, my love." But long after Hannah fell asleep, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart uneasy. She wanted to dismiss it as a child's imagination, but deep down, something inside her stirred, the same quiet pull that had made her go to church that morning. It was as if someone had whispered into her fatigue, "Come back." Days turned into weeks. Work consumed her once again, long hours cleaning offices, numb hands, quiet bus rides through the humid streets. But amid that gray routine, she began noticing small, impossible things. One night, as she turned on the kitchen light, Hannah, who was sitting in the other room, turned her head toward the sudden brightness. Sarah froze. Coincidence, she told herself. She must have heard the click. But it kept happening. A week later, Hannah reached out to grab her cup on the table, without fumbling, without searching. Another time, she stepped aside just before bumping into a chair. Sarah's heart began to race. Blind children, doctors had told her, often develop sharper instincts. But this felt different, something beyond instinct. Something that defied every explanation. She began testing her daughter quietly. One evening she left a toy in the hallway on purpose. When Hannah walked past, she paused and stepped neatly around it. "How did you know it was there?" Sarah asked, trying to sound calm. "I felt it," Hannah said simply. Sarah frowned. "Felt it how?" "I don't know. Like when the wind tells you where to go." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Fear and wonder wrestled inside her chest. The Virgin statue flashed in her mind, the blue mantle, the serene face. Could it be? No, she told herself. Miracles didn't happen anymore. Not to people like her. But miracles, history teaches, rarely appear where one expects them. From Lourdes to Fatima, the mother of Jesus has appeared not to the powerful or the comfortable, but to the weary, the poor, the forgotten, those who have nothing left but faith. Her presence has always favored the humble, children who could barely read, farmers who worked with cracked hands, mothers who prayed in silence through tears. And now, perhaps, she had come quietly to a small apartment in Florida, to a tired woman and her blind daughter. It was Hannah's nanny, Linda, who first spoke the words Sarah didn't dare say aloud. "There's something different about Hannah," she said one Saturday as she dropped the child off. "Different how?" "I don't know," Linda replied, her brow furrowed. "It's as if she can see where things are before touching them. This morning she poured her own juice, without spilling a drop." Sarah's pulse quickened. "You think she can, see?" Linda hesitated. "I don't know, but whatever it isn't normal." That night, when Hannah was asleep, Sarah sat by the window and cried quietly. The city lights blurred through her tears. She didn't know if she was afraid or hopeful. Hope was dangerous, it was the cruelest temptation of all. She had already buried it once, years ago, when the doctors told her there was no cure, no chance, no light. But what if they had been wrong? Finally, unable to bear the uncertainty, Sarah made an appointment with Dr. Hansen, the ophthalmologist who had treated Hannah since infancy. When the day arrived, Sarah missed work, losing precious wages. She carried Hannah into the clinic, heart pounding, as though walking into judgment. Dr. Hansen greeted them warmly. "Sarah, it's good to see you. How's our little girl?" Before he could continue, Sarah blurted out, "Doctor, I think Hannah is reacting to light." He paused, his expression tightening. "Reacting how?" Sarah told him everything, the light switch, the toys, the strange way Hannah seemed to anticipate obstacles. Her words tumbled out fast, her voice trembling between excitement and fear. Dr. Hansen listened quietly, then turned to Hannah with his small flashlight. "Let's see, young lady," he said gently. He shone the beam into her eyes. Hannah blinked. Once. Then again. The doctor froze. He repeated the test, his face paling slightly. He lowered the flashlight, took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes. "Sarah, this isn't possible." Sarah's breath caught. "But it happened, didn't it?" "I've been her doctor since birth," he said slowly. Her optic nerves were completely inactive. There was no signal, nothing to carry light to the brain. But she just blinked. Twice. That's not a reflex. That's response. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "Then she's seeing." He shook his head. "Not exactly. But something's changed. I'll order further tests." As they left the clinic, Sarah felt both lighter and heavier at once. It was too soon to call it a miracle. Too soon to believe. And yet, deep inside, something whispered what reason refused to say: the Mother of Heaven had touched her child. That night, as Hannah drifted to sleep, she asked, "Mom, is Mary watching us?" Sarah's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart. She always is." Then Hannah smiled, a small, knowing smile, and said, "I think she likes our house." Sarah turned away, hiding the tears that came unbidden. Because in that moment, she realized that the miracle had not just begun in her daughter's eyes. It had begun in her heart. The morning after the doctor's visit, Sarah woke before dawn. The apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the slow rhythm of Hannah's breathing from the next room. For years, mornings had been her hardest hour, the time when exhaustion met dread, when life felt like an endless repetition of labor without reward. But that morning, something was different. She felt expectancy. She brewed coffee, watching the steam curl into the air. Her eyes lingered on the first rays of sunlight creeping through the window blinds, casting faint gold lines on the kitchen wall. How many mornings had she sat in this same spot, surrounded by the same dull shadows, without ever noticing how beautiful light could be? She smiled faintly. "Maybe Hannah's teaching me to see," she thought. Hannah woke soon after, padding barefoot into the kitchen, clutching her teddy bear. Sarah noticed how her daughter stopped near the doorway, head tilted, eyes, usually vacant, now darting slightly as if tracking something unseen. "Hannah." The little girl smiled. "The light's on, Mommy." Sarah's breath caught. The overhead bulb wasn't particularly bright, yet Hannah had known. "You can tell." "Yes," Hannah whispered. "It's warm. The air feels different when the light's on." Sarah knelt, her hands trembling. "Sweetheart, can you see it?" Hannah frowned, thoughtful. "Not see. But I think I feel colors." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She pulled her daughter close, her heart racing. For the first time in years, hope did not feel like an enemy. The next weeks became a quiet testing ground of faith and disbelief. Sarah observed everything, every turn of her daughter's head, every blink, every sudden pause. Sometimes Hannah reached for objects before touching them. Other times, she described vague shapes, the round thing, or something shiny. Sarah began keeping a journal. On each page she wrote the date and what Hannah had noticed. She needed proof, for herself as much as for anyone else. March 10th, Hannah says she sees light dancing on the wall. March 12th, she turned when I opened the blinds. March 14th, she pointed at my red sweater and said it feels loud. At night, Sarah reread the entries over and over. Logic told her not to exaggerate. But the handwriting itself trembled with wonder. Dr. Hansen conducted more tests. The results, he said, were inconclusive but extraordinary. There was new neural activity along Hannah's optic nerves, faint, but measurable. Something has changed, he admitted. Though science can't explain it, we can't deny it either. Sarah nodded numbly. Words like activity and neural response felt clinical, too small for what was happening. She didn't need charts to know a miracle was unfolding. Still, she tried to keep her heart guarded. Hope, she told herself, could break a person. But hope, when paired with faith, could also raise the dead. One evening, after dinner, Hannah asked, "Mom, can we go back to the church?" Sarah looked up. "You want to see Mary again?" "Yes," Hannah said with certainty. "She's waiting." They went the next morning. The church was empty except for the soft crackle of candles near the altar. The same statue of the Virgin stood bathed in light from a stained glass window, blue, gold, and white reflections pooling on the floor like spilled heaven. Sarah led Hannah to the front pew. The child approached the statue as if walking toward a friend. Then she stopped, her face lifted. "She's shining," Hannah whispered. Sarah blinked, startled. The statue was still, the same as ever. Yet sunlight from the stained glass was indeed casting a moving halo around it, subtle, shifting with the wind. "She's shining," Sarah repeated. "Yes. Like she's happy." Hannah reached out her hands again, touching the folds of the Virgin's robe. "She feels warm again," she said softly. "Not cold like before." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. She sank to her knees beside her daughter, overcome. "Mary, Mother of God," she whispered, "whatever this is, thank you." From that day forward, Hannah's progress quickened. She began describing colors, though she didn't know their names. The word blue meant quiet, yellow meant ticklish, red meant loud and happy. When Sarah held up a candle, Hannah said it was singing. Soon the story began to spread. The priest spoke of it carefully, avoiding the word miracle, but parishioners whispered after Massachusetts. Some called it divine intervention. Others warned of delusion. But the faithful came quietly, lighting candles near the statue, praying, hoping for their own small resurrections. Sarah tried to stay invisible. She had no interest in attention, only in gratitude. Yet one evening, while she cleaned the church after hours, Father James approached her gently. "You know," he said, "sometimes Mary doesn't just grant miracles. She awakens hearts. Maybe what she's giving you both is not just sight, but faith reborn." Sarah smiled weakly. "I think I'm learning to see, too, Father." He nodded, eyes kind. "That's how it always begins, with a mother's love, and a child's trust." As the months passed, Hannah's world of darkness continued to dissolve, replaced by shapes, colors, and shadows she struggled to name. And with each passing day, Sarah noticed how her own prayers had changed. No longer desperate or angry, they had become gentle, grateful, full of awe. Because deep down, she knew, this was not merely her daughter learning to see. It was heaven reminding the world that light, like faith, does not begin with the eyes. It begins in the heart. The doctors called it progress. Sarah called it grace. But between those two words stretched months of confusion, patience, and pain. Sight did not arrive like dawn suddenly bursting through the clouds, it came like a slow sunrise, hesitant, fragmented. The first time Hannah opened her eyes to the morning light, she cried. The brightness burned, it was too much. She pressed her face into her mother's chest, trembling. "The light hurts," she whispered. Sarah held her tight. It's okay, sweetheart. The light always hurts a little before it becomes beautiful. It was true. Every miracle comes with a cost. The body and soul must learn to receive what heaven gives. Dr. Hansen explained it simply. Her brain doesn't know what to do with the information. She's experiencing the world through sight for the first time. It's overwhelming. For weeks, Hannah lived in a blur of color and confusion. Shapes melted into one another. The human face, the pattern of a chair, the play of light on glass, everything terrified and fascinated her. At night, she dreamed of colors she couldn't name. She woke crying, describing a world that moves too fast. Sometimes she refused to open her eyes at all. Why did Mary make it so bright? She once asked, her voice trembling. Sarah's heart broke. She knelt beside her daughter, brushing away her tears. Maybe because she wanted you to know how beautiful light really is. The days turned into lessons. Sarah became her daughter's teacher and interpreter of vision. She would sit beside her, holding an apple, describing every detail, the smooth skin, the curve of the stem, the color red that feels like love. She showed her the sky, the grass, the streetlights at dusk. She taught her the names of colors by how they felt. Blue was calm, green was safe, white was peace. Each day was a revelation. Each day was a battle. Because with sight came fear, fear of the new, of imperfection, of losing again what had just been found. But Sarah refused to let fear win. Her faith had taken root too deeply to be uprooted now. In the quiet of night, she would kneel beside Hannah's bed, whispering the Hail Mary under her breath. Not out of superstition, but gratitude. For she knew that what science studied with microscopes, faith could only touch with love. And slowly, Hannah began to see not just with her eyes, but with wonder. One spring afternoon, Dr. Hansen adjusted the small pair of glasses on Hannah's face. These should help sharpen what she's already perceiving, he said. Let's try something simple. He turned off the lights, then switched on a lamp across the room. Hannah, can you tell me what you see? The girl blinked. Her small hands tightened around her teddy bear. It's warm, she whispered. It's bright. He smiled. Can you see your mom? Hannah turned her head slowly toward the chair where Sarah sat, breathless. Her lips parted. For the first time, her gaze met her mother's eyes. The room went still. Mommy? Sarah's heart shattered and healed in the same instant. Yes, my love. It's me. Hannah's face lit with awe. She reached out, tracing her mother's cheeks, then her eyes, her mouth. You're real, she said softly, as if seeing a miracle. Sarah began to cry, laughing through tears. Of course I'm real, sweetheart. I thought your voice made you, Hannah whispered. But you have a face too. In that fragile moment, time seemed to stop. The fluorescent light overhead flickered, catching the moisture in their eyes, turning it into tiny reflections of something divine. Dr. Hansen looked away discreetly, his own eyes wet. Science had brought him to many discoveries, but never to one that felt so holy. When they returned home that evening, Sarah placed Hannah's glasses on the table and lifted her up to look out the window. The world outside shimmered in golden twilight, the trees, the parked cars, the people walking by. What do you see? She asked. Hannah smiled. It's too much, she said softly. Too beautiful. Sarah wrapped her arms around her daughter and whispered, then that's how you know it's real. Over the next weeks, life took on new meaning. Everything ordinary became sacred. The kitchen light became a sunrise. A raindrop on the window became a jewel. Even Sarah's worn hands, cracked from years of work, seemed transformed in her daughter's eyes. At church, the same statue of Mary stood in her quiet corner, surrounded by candles and whispered prayers. When Hannah saw it for the first time, she gasped. That's her, she cried. That's the lady who smiled at me. Sarah's tears returned, unstoppable. She knelt beside her daughter. "Yes," she whispered. "That's her." They prayed together, side by side, one mother thanking heaven for the return of sight, and another, silent and painted, gazing down with eternal calm. For the first time, Sarah noticed the inscription carved into the marble below the statue, Mater Misericordiae, Mother of Mercy. She smiled through her tears. Mercy, that was exactly what this was. Not earned. Not explained. Just given. And as the candles flickered in the quiet church, their small flames seemed to echo the truth both mother and child now knew. The light of heaven does not always descend with thunder. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a whisper, like a touch, like a mother's love, and it changes everything. Months passed, and the miracle of sight became the miracle of living. Hannah adapted quickly. At first, she stumbled through the flood of images, faces, trees, clouds, words written on paper. But each stumble was a victory. Every color she named was a hymn, every new sight an answered prayer. Sarah, too, was transforming. She had spent years walking through life half asleep, numbed by exhaustion, resentment, and quiet despair. But now, every morning when she watched her daughter wake and open her eyes to the world, it was as if God himself whispered, "See, I am making all things new." It wasn't always easy. There were days when Hannah's head ached from too much light. Some days, she cried because the world was too noisy to look at. Sarah learned to dim the lamps, to move slowly, to speak gently. She discovered patience she never knew she possessed. Faith, she realized, was not about lightning bolt miracles, it was about endurance. About showing up each day with love, even when light hurt. One afternoon, they sat together on the porch as the Florida sky began to turn orange and pink. Hannah's small hand pointed upward. "Mom," she said, her voice soft with wonder, "it's beautiful." Sarah followed her gaze. "The sunset?" "Yes," Hannah said. "It's like the sky is saying thank you." Sarah smiled. "Maybe it is." For a long time, neither spoke. They simply watched the sky burn into gold and fade into twilight. For Sarah, it was not just a sunset. It was the fulfillment of every sleepless prayer she had whispered in the dark. And when night finally fell, the stars appeared, distant, trembling, eternal. Hannah lifted her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the stars. "They're little lights," she said. "Like candles for heaven." Sarah's heart swelled. "Yes, my love. Just like candles for heaven."
A year later, they returned to the same small church where everything had begun. The same worn pews, the same smell of wax and wood, the same statue of the Virgin Mary bathed in soft morning light. But now, everything was different. Hannah no longer needed her mother to guide her. She walked straight to the altar, carrying a single white rose in her hand. She knelt before the statue, placed the flower at Mary's feet, and whispered, "Thank you." Sarah stood behind her, hands clasped, her heart overflowing. Around them, a few parishioners watched silently. Some wept. Others crossed themselves. They all knew the story, the blind girl who could now see, the mother who had dared to hope again, the quiet miracle that had rekindled faith in their small town. Father James approached softly, laying a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Your daughter's light has touched more hearts than you know," he said. "Sometimes, the Blessed Mother chooses one small life to remind us all that heaven hasn't forgotten the earth." Sarah nodded through tears. "I think she chose both of us, Father." He smiled. "Yes. Because a child's miracle is never just for the child. It's for every soul that needs to see again." That evening, when they returned home, Sarah found Hannah sitting by the window, gazing at the fading light. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Hannah turned, smiling. "I was just remembering when everything was dark." Sarah froze. "Do you miss it?" The child thought for a moment. "No," she said, shaking her head. "But I think the darkness helped me listen better." Now I can see and listen at the same time. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, hugging her tightly. Never forget that, sweetheart. Because seeing is only a gift when it helps you love. Outside, the last rays of sunlight lingered on the horizon, bathing the world in gold. In that glow, Sarah saw everything differently: the cracks on the wall, the dust in the air, the scars on her own hands. Nothing was ordinary anymore. Everything was a reminder that grace hides in plain sight. Years later, long after Hannah had grown into a young woman, people still told her story. Some called it divine intervention. Others called it a medical mystery. But for Sarah and Hannah, it was simpler. It was mercy. Whenever Hannah visited the church, she would kneel before the same statue of Mary, still holding the blue mantle, still smiling gently through time. And every time, Hannah would whisper the same words she said as a child. "Thank you for showing me the light." And somewhere in the quiet, amid the flicker of candles and the soft scent of roses, the Virgin's serene smile seemed to say what heaven always says to those who believe. The light was never gone, my child. You only had to open your heart to see it.